As a next step, let's start creating some components. So we have to go to the members menu, create profile, or press the right mouse key, drag it a little bit, go down there, and then at 12 o'clock we have create standard profile. To call up the setting box, right mouse click, and there's a couple of things I have to explain here. This is the mark number. By default we leave it at number 1. If you want to force anything, feel free to do so, but normally the marking will already do a good job with prefixes, suffixes, doesn't matter what logic you're using. So by default we'll generally just model nearly everything with mark number 1. It's just when you have concrete components or existing components, elements that have to be in the 3D model but must not appear in the bill of material, then we will give it mark 0 or dummy member as we also call it. So it would be in the model, it would be considered for clash checking, but it would not appear in the bill of material or in the fabrication outputs. The designation, it's always easy for someone to know what they're looking at, whether it's a column, a beam, a bracing, a certain type of plate. Feel free to enter any name you want in there. By the way, in this little pull down list we see the last used names in here. So if I can keep going on and I say plate, enter, plate will be added to the list. If now I call this also gusset, if I use the name gusset, gusset will also be added to the list, and so on as you're going through your project. If you hit the icon on the left, you'll see a predefined list of names that are coming from the main release or from your settings. Once it comes to the section itself, feel free to type in, if you know what you need, feel free to type it in. There again also there's a list of last used sections, last used profiles. If now you press on the little profile icon on the left, you will see anything that starts with W, simply because we already entered W10 by 30. So I will see all the W's and the WT's. If now I enter H, for example, press the icon again, I'll see anything that starts with an H. So the HP, HSS, HSSR, and so forth. If now I leave the field empty and I press the icon again, then I will see all the timber profiles here, these boards, for example, the channels, HPs, the full catalog, including pipes and AISC standards, timber sections. There are so many things in there, virtual joists and so on. But if I know what I need, I'll just take by default what's already available just to have something. And as it comes to steel grade or material, we call it material simply because it could be something else than steel. It could be aluminum, it could be timber, it could be concrete, it could be insulation material. It doesn't really matter. There again as well, if I press on the icon, it will show me anything that starts with A36 simply because I already entered A36. It works a bit like a filter. If I now just enter A, then I'll see anything that starts with an A. And if I leave the field empty, press the icon again, I'll see all the steel grades. Steel grades and other materials, but let's face it, steel is what we'll use the most. And once again, a little list of most used steel grades. The preview on the right side will always show us what we're about to create. Can be quite handy. This you must consider is our eye looking at our UCS. So our UCS, whether it is in 2D or in a 3D environment, this is our UCS, these two arrows. And there's two dots which stand for a start point and an end point, so we can clearly see how the element will be oriented. Whether it is on the side of the points we pick, whether it is in front, behind. There are 9 anchor points to choose from. If you also say, well, we place it on the side, but we also need a little offset, feel free to enter, for example, 2-inch offset, enter, and the preview will update. And if I enter a negative value, it will go the other way. Same thing goes for the depth offset. If you need to give your component a depth offset, feel free to enter such a value. Then the side we're looking at the front view. Here we're looking at the top view, rear view, bottom view. For symmetrical profiles, of course, it's quite easy to still understand what we're doing, but with unequal angles, for example, it's always convenient to know which side we're looking at. And finally, you could add a little extension. So let's say we want to extend this profile maybe by 5 inches at the start point, or retract it by 1 inch, make it 1 inch shorter. It's not really that visible. Let's make it minus 5 inches, for example. You can see it better. So it gives a 5-inch offset from the starting point, and we can also enter such a similar offset at the end point. That will prevent you, or that will avoid you from having to lengthen or shorten and adapt something afterwards. An element could be created over one point. Good for a column, but of course, since there is no endpoint, we would have to enter what the length of this component is. So if I would say this is a 16 feet component, and I press pick one point over there, or one point over here, I'll see that component coming in. If now I say, no, I'm going to create that over 2 points, start point, end point, there it is. Or if I were to say start point, end point, there it is. I could also create a component over 3 points. By that then we would have start point, end point, and direction. So this will orient the top flange of that component. 1, 2, 3 for the top flange. As we can see now, it's rotated. Or we go 1, 2, 3. Or you'd say 1, 2, 3. As we can see, it orients the top flange. Bent members, also possible. Of course, in this case, we would need to add a radius afterwards. So that is 1, 2, 3, enter to confirm. But you could make it as crazy as you want it to be. Of course, we would enter a radius afterwards for the bending radius. And then there would also be an option for curved. Just enter the radius in there. Start, finish, enter. There we go. So I would enter this as a column. 1, 2, 1, 2, right click. Call now a beam. I'll create it in top view. Anchor point is slightly different. If you want, you can change the representation or the preview position. If I personally prefer this one, and I would go 1, 2 in this case, 1, 2. Just be aware of the fact that the UCS in 2D and 3D is different. 2D would be like AutoCAD. Horizontal is X, vertical is Y, depth is Z. Whereas in 3D, we can see that here also, X goes this way, Y and Z. So if I create this beam, being in top view, center top point anchor, 1, 2, I'm indeed seeing this now relating to my UCS. I'm indeed seeing this in top view. If now I'm in a 3D environment, then it's a little bit different. My UCS is the 0 level, that flat horizontal level. So the UCS will be related to that view. That's the only little thing you really have to think of when modeling in a 3D environment as compared to a 2D environment. There's also a second way to create components. So creation type is now set to 2 points, as we could call it, or linear. But if I set it to this, all the preview icons will change. This will allow us to create that component perpendicular to the view we're in, or perpendicular to the UCS. So if I call this thing once again column, place it centered, it's away from me or away from the UCS. I say no, it's coming toward us. It has a length of 16 feet for now. Okay. If I do this now in 3D, over there, enter, we can see we can create a column in one shot. If now I use this very same function in a 2D view, it's indeed perpendicular to our view. I'll undo this, call up the setting box, pull it away from us, change the anchor point slightly. Then I would say here, then I would have this beam. It can be very useful for purlins sometimes, especially in a sloped case, since now I'm picking one point and pressing enter to confirm, but if I press 1, 2, as we can see, that component will now be tilted according to the second point we pick. But if we say no, it just has to be horizontal, then 1 point is enough, followed by an enter. If now you work with a channel, there's just this icon to flip the profile around. Symmetrical profiles, we would never see the difference, but with profiles such as a channel, it could be we want to orient them one way or the other.